Our topic today is pride, protests, and Persia.
Nobody can think of a time where one topic just totally encapsulated an entire month.
Right. It's cosplay in the sense that they're seeing themselves as American revolutionaries.
Hello, and welcome to the Pop Culture Contrarian podcast with Thomas, Sterling, and Andrew.
Hello.
Hey guys.
Our topic today is pride, protests, and Persia. We're doing a little roundup of the things we want to talk about.
Recent events.
Recent events. Important events.
Yes, indeed. Before we get started, make sure to check out patriotpostshop.com and buy this Gulf of America t-shirt. It's sure to make liberals cry, which is something we love to do here.
Sure. Like
Gulf Shore.
Yeah.
Nice one.
Please don't groan and please don't turn off the podcast.
So go to patriotpostshop.com to pick up the shirt, and there's books and mugs and all sorts of other things you can buy there. Go do that. And the best way to support us is to go to patriotpost.us and subscribe to our free daily newsletter. It comes out every day at noon. Go do that. It's right. It's free. And you'll know what's going on, that's pretty great. All right. Pride, protests, and Persia. So let's start with that first one there. Pride. Andrew?
Yes.
How's Pride Month been going? Has it been a rousing success for the gays?
Well, I would say it's more akin to one of the 7 deadly sins.
Oh, okay.
And when I say that, I mean that...
Pride in general.
Yeah, it is being treated more like that.
Yes.
By all the corporations. Yes, of course. We are going to see the rainbows on logos. Mm-hmm. And that is probably never going to go completely away.
But fewer.
Many fewer.
Many fewer are kowtowing and saying that we're gay for 1 month.
Yes. You heard it here first, folks. Andrew is gay. Put that out there on all socials.
Well, I did say we're gay, so sorry.
Andrew and Thomas are gay.
I think our wives would ask questions about that.
Yes.
Being married to women is gay. Didn't you know that? That's why I'm the
Apparently.
only straight person here.
Apparently, yes. Pride Month, it is less popular. You know, it is less being completely taking over the entire culture for an entire month, which in my life, and probably everyone who's older than me, nobody can think of a time where one topic just totally encapsulated an entire month.
Yeah, except Christmas.
I mean, except Christmas.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's more been within the last decade that I felt like it's been oppressive like this. I don't.
And Christmas is for everyone.
Yes.
And I don't.
Pride is not for everyone.
I don't recall it being. I think they just over the last decade they leaned into it so hard that now the inevitable backlash is happening where people are just like exhausted from this kind of like, okay, we get it, stop it.
Yeah, it's like
even
how about
even lots of people who are gay that I've seen online who are just like, okay, guys, we're done with this. Stop.
It's like you can have.
Please.
I think anyone in America can have a day that they want to celebrate whatever it is they want to celebrate. Mm-hmm. But forcing the whole culture to just embrace it.
All in existence, bent to my will.
An exclusive thing, because it's totally exclusive.
Yeah.
It's not about everybody being able to participate in this culture. It's about this one small subset of the culture doing whatever they want and then forcing everybody else to participate.
Right, because it's Main Street or Broad Street. It's the center of town. That's where they go.
I mean, it's
So it's to look on and to praise it, but not be part of it.
Right. It's designed intentionally to, when you're trying to inculcate a culture with a value system, you really push and push and push and push it to eventual greater acceptance, which is exactly what the idea was behind it. And so that's why we've seen and experienced this for, year after year after year. And I think, there's a number of reasons why now people are just fed up with it, done with it, saying, hey, We could care less at this point. We know you guys exist. This is not. It's not like making sure that we know that there are people that are gay in the world. No, it's gone way overboard, and I think there's a lot of people who are just said, okay, we're tired of it. Our sports teams have to do, a special rainbow outfit, and all these businesses are supposed to, like you were saying, change their labels or their logos to look like the rainbow. Yeah. All this stuff, and I think people are just finding like enough.
Yeah, I mean, it started out with we just want equality and be normal like everybody else to you will transition your kid and we will take them from you.
literally. Yeah. Colorado and California, shame on y'all. Maine, it's everywhere though. It's Vanderbilt University was a big part of it a few years ago. They've mended their ways somewhat since then.
Hopefully.
Yeah. The other aspect of this is that Pride has kind of shifted from this is who I love, get over it. I'm a consenting adult, I can do it. To, I mean, the famous line is born this way or this is who I am, which is it's all that you are. If you're gay, it has to be your big thing. And the
defining factor of your whole person.
Right. And being straight is not my whole thing, which is really good since I'm still single. Because if that was my whole thing, I'd be just the most boring person on face of the earth, which, maybe you're saying I am anyway, but then look at these two guys. So like, hey.
Even more boring?
But the interesting thing is that on the right, you've had some gay people who've been attracted to the ideals and values of conservatism and republicanism and limited government. And they have made it very clear, or at least the ones I'm thinking of, that being gay is not all that they are. It is one of the things they are, but they almost define themselves in opposition to that one part of themselves.
I guess Dave Rubin's probably a prominent example.
I'm a Dave Rubin fan. I listen to his show pretty regularly. And yeah, he says, I think his line is, I'm only gay after 10 p.m.
That's too much information.
Great. I'm glad you're not gay the rest of the time.
Right.
And then, there's other people. There's someone in the Trump administration who I can't even remember his name because he's not made it a big deal.
Rick Grinnell,
who after he was nominated is when you found out he was gay, which is completely the opposite of what it would be like if he was on the left.
And then that fellow with the really long hair that got the Amish vote.
Oh, Scott Pressler. Yeah.
Another good example.
Right.
That is a part of who he is, but it's not like the defining part of who he is. He defines himself by doing the things that he believes are right and encouraging other people to do that.
And then there's, just some really, like Douglas Murray, if you know who that is a freaking genius. He's one of the smartest people alive, I think.
He's British.
Yeah. So that kind of raises an interesting question because since 2015 and the Obergefell Supreme Court decision ruled that gay marriage was allowed, basically.
Redefined marriage
to allow gay marriage. Since then, conservatives have mostly been like, oh, well, it's out of our hands now. Oh, well, we lost that one. Let's move on. Some events recently have started to raise the question of, was that the right decision? Or just because two adults are consenting in the thing they do, does that mean it's okay to do it? Is it something we should accept?
Or should it be legally defined as the same thing?
As a marriage.
Right. Which is a very old definition.
That was kind of a complex little knot I just said there. But the basic question is, how should conservatives treat the growing number of gay people, gay, lesbian, whatever, who identify with conservative values on other things and limited government and those kinds of things? Thomas, do you have anything to say on that?
Part of the temptation is the toothpaste. You can't get it back in the tube, right? Mm-hmm. I think you have to kind of look at the issue of what homosexuality is. And I think we've kind of been educated to think of it, you pointed out born this way, or that it was just quote unquote a natural reality of a certain segment of the human population. Mm-hmm. And so everybody should just accept that, and it's not wrong or deviant or whatever it may be.
And one thing they claimed was that it's not catching. And I think people might say, it seems like it kind of is.
Well, historically, and I think historically it's right to look at it, it was a result, it is a deviancy of human sexuality. Mm-hmm. Naturally, I think you can make that argument, but you can definitely make that argument based on Scripture. Scripture is quite clear. And so when you're looking at people who are in this same-sex attraction, caught in this, you could say, proclivity, what we used to do is investigate it as to what might be the causes behind why someone would end up struggling with this. Mm-hmm. And what effectively happened was with the whole gay movement was, no, it's not, nothing's wrong with it. We just have to make sure everybody accepts it, which is why the whole pride thing was even, developed. Mm-hmm. Was it as an effort to stop asking that question of what's wrong with these people and start saying they're perfectly normal, embrace them.
Right. Or maybe reframing what's wrong to what happened to this person.
It can, yeah, that's fine. I think that what we need to understand is it is a deviancy and stop trying to play that it's not a deviancy. That doesn't mean that we then judge them as less of a person or that they're somehow less valuable or that they need to be looked on, as a contagion in society or something like that, which definitely did happen. And I can understand that a lot of them suffered abuse because of that.
Right.
So we have to be careful in how we talk about the situation, but it's kind of like similar. And I think that in one sense, it's silver lining with the whole transgender movement is it helps re-examine the problem. Mm-hmm. Because the transgender movement is quite obviously somebody who's bought into a lie about the nature of who they are and is trying to force people to see them in their delusion. Right? Yeah. They want society to embrace the delusion that they're in this opposite sex body than what their real sex is, or that they're some kind of amorphous non-sex, non-binary, whatever that means kind of thing.
And on that, I think the key factor that has made this so obvious is that the whole purpose of being trans is getting people to play along. And when people don't play along...
You're transgressing the... Yeah.
Right.
Transphobic.
When people don't play along, that's like the most hateful thing you can do to a trans person.
Right.
Which that gives away the game right there.
Yeah. When we're going back to approach this in the question of, pride and why there's kind of this backlash now, I think that it has to be entered carefully, but with understanding, but also not compromisingly. And that's the thing that I think re-examining Obergefell and saying, was this the right decision? Recently, the Southern Baptist Convention, as a church denomination, they re-emphasized that, yes, their traditional marriage between one man and one woman is the biblical way and the only right definition for marriage. That is not the popular position even right now. Mm-hmm. But that is, as Christians, biblically faithful Christians, that's really the only position we can take. We can recognize that the state has declared this redefinition, but we at the same time have to say, but that's actually not a biblical definition of marriage. And we have to willing to be in an uncomfortable position when people are going to say, yeah, but that's not the law, and say, yeah, but that is the truth.
Another aspect of you can say biblically accurate, and that's correct, or you can just say the traditional view of marriage, because marriage has always been one man, one woman. Maybe you had some religions where,
you had polygamy.
Where you had polygamy.
Yeah.
But in general, it's one man and one woman. Yeah. And the purpose of that legally was to create a new family so that the children born into that family are part of that unit, and you know where they belong, and everyone else knows where they belong.
Well, you don't actually have children if you don't have that.
Oh, in the traditional sense.
Yeah, if you don't have a society if you don't have marriage.
Right. You have marriage and then you have the children. Yeah.
Right.
One thing that's happened is there's been a little bit of maybe some of these conservative or right-leaning gay people have practiced their homosexuality out in the open. And it's made some conservatives kind of take a step back. The actions of these gay people are so transgressive to proper action that it makes people who agree with them on political things say, well, hang on, how can you agree with me on that and then do what you're doing? It's like if someone was flaunting, I'm just going to use this metaphor, if someone was flaunting a porn addiction, it's like, hang on, you're not a person I can really take seriously while you're flaunting that, while you're saying this is a part of me and it's something I should be doing. No, it's not. It's bad.
When you're taking something that's shameful and saying, no, I'm proud of it. And that's, I think, what you're kind of mentioning is that very thing. Is what it is disgraceful naturally, and people know that, even though they suppress that truth. And part of the Pride movement is a really aggressive effort to try to suppress that, and to condemn anyone who would say otherwise as being a bigot and being hateful. Yeah. And the trouble is that what these people are, they're caught in a really damaging sin, and what they need is help to see that and help to get out of it, not to continue in it.
The question I'm left with is, well, we've got these people on our side now. Scott Pressler, Dave Rubin, these are people who I am thrilled to have on my side when election time rolls around. And I'm not ungrateful to them for their contributions. But I also, what's the line? How do I say, hey, you're a great person to have on a team, but hey, you got an issue here. And it's not something I can say I'm a fan of.
Well, part of it is, I think there's two things. If you knew someone personally, you have the ability to speak to them as a friend. Mm-hmm. Someone who you're not friends with, but like they're an influence or something like that's another story. And then you can just say, on principle and what I believe is the best, this is where I stand. And the notion that I'm opposed to the redefinition of marriage, because I think that's wrong and destructive for society. It doesn't mean that then that gives you free carte blanche to then attack the individual who may be in it and belittle them and name call them, et cetera, et cetera. That's not what we're advocating at all.
No.
Well, and so what you're saying is, when we come to various political positions, and I'll get to you in a second, I think you can have agreement on a number of things, even when you have a disagreement on this.
Yeah, you
sure. And everyone has their hangups.
Yeah.
There's going to be, you could argue about so many people in the conservative movement who have maybe even very visible public struggles with issues that are not having to do with their sexuality, but having other problems, maybe substance abuse, or, maybe they're just disrespectful people. I don't know.
Anger.
Yeah, anger issues. There's a plethora of problems that a person can have. And so I think if we're asking this question of what do we do with this set of people who are coming over to our side, I say we do what we do with everybody who's on our side. You treat everyone equally.
Mm-hmm. I would put the last thing here is, I do think what we're seeing, this kind of a pushback against the outward excesses of Pride celebration is good, and it should be welcomed, and it is an opportunity.
Yeah.
Yep.
Good.
Well said. That's a good wrap up, Thomas. All right. So that's Pride. Protests. There were a couple weeks ago, almost, I guess 2 weeks ago now, in LA, there were riots and
still
flying
going on
Mexican
to some
flags.
degrees,
They're still going on to
These
some
are
degree.
the anti-ICE riots.
Yeah, anti-immigration riots. We're not going to touch on that as much, just except to say it's happening. It's when you are protesting in America against deportation and you're flying a Mexican flag. Hey, what are you thinking?
Yeah, it kind of speaks pretty loudly of what you think about our country.
Right. That's just really, really stupid. But this past Saturday, there were these No Kings protests here in America, all across America, in our city, in all sorts of cities across America. There were No Kings protests. Well, I have good news. There are no kings in America.
Yeah. No.
Yeah.
Woohoo! You did it.
Since 1776.
Correct.
I would have loved to see this No King protest in the UK.
Well, it happened.
Did it?
There were No Kings protests in, I think, 4 or 5 European countries that currently have monarchs, but they were about Trump.
That is hilarious.
I think they need to redefine what they mean by king.
Why would they have a problem with Trump being king if they have kings themselves?
Here is the core to that question, which is these protests are organized and funded by left-wing activists.
It's all political.
And these left-wing activists are not bound to just America or just to the UK. They're all across the West.
Right.
They're all across the world.
Yeah.
And so when there's movement on the No Kings protest happening in America, they're going to make sure it happens where they are too. And Brits on podcasts always complain about Americans donating their cultural issues to them, which is true. You had George Floyd protests in the UK, and it's like, well, that's not even an issue. Your police aren't armed. Like,
Oh my word.
so it's just something that happens, that we export our demented leftists overseas. And sorry, guys.
Do you think this is
Yes.
going to get any traction and continue on, or do you think this is kind of a flash in the pan?
It seems like a flash.
It seems like a flash. I didn't at first. I was like, great, this is another summer of love incoming. And of course, there was violence in the typical bad actor towns like, Portland, those kind of places. And I saw a map of where the protests were scheduled. I mean, there's a lot of places all across the entire United States, like every major city. But we haven't heard widespread reports of massive violence like what we saw during the Summer of Love. So maybe it's not going to be a thing. I don't know.
I think there are two interesting things about these No King protests. One, there's a growing trend of people who've noticed that at these kinds of protests, the people who show up, not exclusively, but in large proportion, have gray hair.
Lately, that's been the case. Yeah, that was true with all of the Elon Musk protests.
Right, the anti-Tesla protests.
Just really fascinating.
I guess that's just part of the trend that got Trump elected, which is that young people move to the right, especially young men. And I guess they're just not showing up for these protests. And so that leaves the boomers, basically.
Yeah.
The old hippie crowd?
Old hippie crowd seems to be who it is, yeah.
If Trump were a king, he would not be having so much opposition.
Yeah, well, that's what he said.
Yeah.
And it was really funny. He was asked about it.
Several No Kings protests planned across the country on Saturday as well. What are your thoughts on those?
What do they call it? No king?
No King.
No, we're not a king. We're not a king at all. Thank you very much.
Which is, of course, the royal we that he's using there.
Yeah.
And then there was an event, I think, either that day or the next day, where he wore a purple tie, which is purple is the color of royalty.
Yeah.
So
He's just trolling.
he's having so much fun.
The main issue here is these people who are protesting, they're saying things like, we're using fascistic tactics to remove people from the country and sending in the military, particularly Marines, into Los Angeles to quell the riots, and then having a big, huge military parade on his birthday. There is framed with a position of like, this is what kings and dictators do.
Right. And just for the record, to clarify, we're not going to dig into this too much, but the parade on Trump's birthday was actually on the 250th birthday of the U.S. Army.
Yeah.
That's what the parade
It's also on Flag Day.
And Flag Day, which is the birthday of the U.S. Army. So it's not about Trump.
Yeah.
But so here are some of the flags from our local No Kings protest, or signs. F ice with a crossed out swastika.
Okay.
I'm not normally a sign kind of person, but geez.
I actually like that.
Yeah,
it's kinda
it got in there. It's like, I don't know.
You
I'll
could use
just
that-
write something.
You could use that for anything.
Yeah.
That's your just annual protest sign that they hand out.
They gave him a piece of cardboard, in a Sharpie. Okay, write your message.
It's like, I'm going to use this one for the next 5 years because it just applies across the board.
It's pretty great. Unpaid protester with unpaid underlined. That one's interesting because the only times I've heard of paid protesters is at leftist protests.
And so I think that's why that's come out, because that was a big talking point regarding who's paying for it, because Congress is actually investigating who was funding in LA specifically the protests against ICE. And so I think that's why that sign's come out.
But I feel like it would land better if they had been accusing right-wingers of having paid protesters, because then it's like, see, we're unpaid protesters. But instead, it's a left-winger saying, like, unlike all those people I agree with and I'm here at this protest with, I was not paid for, which is like, okay, that's kind of a weak message. But
Yeah.
I think it's just an attempt to push back against the charge that a lot of these people are paid protesters.
yeah.
So he's, or she is identifying as unpaid.
And the other thing that was interesting about these protests is that I saw the communications from on high at the Democratic National Convention, whatever it's called, DNC committee, to wear patriotic outfits and fly American flags. And so they did. There's a few American flags in this photo. The only two that are really prominent are upside down, which, if you don't know that, flying your U.S. flag upside down on a boat or ship is a sign of distress, and it means come help. And so that's not really patriotism. You're not saying I love America when you fly an American flag upside down. You're saying I need help, or America's in trouble, or something like that.
Weren't there some people dressed as Revolutionary War soldiers.
There were supposed to be. I don't see any in this picture.
Did you see the video of the girl beating the piñata Trump?
It's just these obscene things they bring to these events, these public events. That I saw a cardboard cutout of Trump naked, but of course, they drew it up themselves. It's like, that's weird. That's just weird.
Was it supposed to be Emperor has no clothes sort of thing?
I guess maybe. You're probably putting more thought into this than they did, Andrew. The thing I do want to dig in on a little bit before we move on is the American flags.
Yeah.
It really seems, one, it's not going to work because these people don't like the American flag. So you're not fooling anybody, I don't think. Maybe some people are fooled, but I don't think you're fooling anybody by taking the American flag. Because, there were articles a few years ago of, I drove out on Long Island, New York, and I saw a bunch of American flags, and I felt unsafe. And it's like, really?
Wow.
So, y'all have any thoughts on that, on the American flag for lefty protesters?
I mean, it just seems like an attempt to co-opt the cause of patriotism. Mm-hmm. The revolutionary cause of 1776 has traditionally been a cause that the right venerates and upholds as being worth remembering and important for the message of liberty. So it seems like a co-opt of that and a takeover, an attempt to take it over.
Yeah, I think it's leftist cosplay.
Yeah.
Well, and I think it's because so often at these protests they have either pride flags or they have, as I mentioned earlier, in LA, they have Mexican flags. And I think they saw, hey, this looks really bad when we're protesting under the flags of other nations. Right. So I'm going to call my volunteer at the local protest and tell her to make it sure everyone brings American flags. And I think that's basically all this is. I think it's a purely cynical move.
Right. It's cosplay in the sense that they're seeing themselves as American revolutionaries, and the king that they're fighting against obviously is supposedly Trump, who's obviously not a king. He was duly elected president of the United States. They just disagree with the fact that his policies, they don't like specifically regarding immigration and his crackdown on illegal immigration, and they want to voice it and try to frame it as if he's acting like some dictator.
And that is the interesting thing. I think that's part of why this isn't landing, is they're desperately trying to find something that will stick in terms of criticizing Trump, because I think Democrats continue every time they're polled to be at their lowest ever popularity rating.
Yep.
I think it's at 20% right now of people that say they like the Democrat Party. So that means even the lefties don't like the Democrat Party right now, which is not surprising.
Yeah.
Just one last thing on this, and then we can move on to Persia, is there was a really funny fake meme, but it's funny anyway, allegedly from Trump, which it would be great. I think what Trump should do is just copy the text of this and post it himself.
Yeah, that would be like the ultimate copy pasta.
But the meme says, from his Truth Social account is what it alleges to be. A huge thank you to all the No Kings protesters yesterday. I was very concerned a king was trying to take my place, but thanks to your tireless efforts, I am still your president. Great job all. Which is just, if only that was real. And Trump's funny enough, he could do it. Someone else beat him to it on this one. All right. And then Persia. Which is, we're calling it Persia. You probably are thinking of Iran. And of course, the thing that's going on is the Iran-Israel war has finally kind of popped off. I wouldn't say it began, because I'd say it's been going on for a couple of years now, a year and a half at least.
Yeah, this is more direct between the two nations, although it's not the first time it's been direct like this, because there were missile attacks and strikes over the past couple of years between them. But this is obviously has escalated to the next level.
Yeah.
Yeah. Israel is systematically trying to destroy the nuclear infrastructure.
And the military leadership.
In Iran. And they are doing a very good job,
they're doing
by the way. Literally shooting the military leadership in the street with guns and dropping bombs into Iranian nuclear facilities. Basically, to sum it up, Iran is saying, hey, can we start talking about this? Because whenever they come to a point, when the enemy comes to a point with like, hey, can we talk about this? Yeah, you kind of know how things are going.
Yeah. So to give you the background, if you haven't been following this, a little bit more than 60 days ago in April, Israel, this was not well known, but it was in the news. Israel was ready to strike Iran, basically this exact mission. And Trump, and I think Tulsi Gabbard encouraged Trump to do this, waved them off and said, let me talk to Iran. And he told Iran, I'm giving you 60 days, and he tried to talk to them. He had 5 rounds of talks, which he said, or which his administration said was direct and Iran said was indirect. They were always crossing wires on that. And they talked and talked and talked, and Iran would not stop enriching uranium, which is the thing that is at issue here, because they're trying to make a nuclear bomb so they can blow away Israel, so they can fulfill their prophecy and get the new caliph to reveal himself. That's basically what they're after. That's a very Cliff Notes version of it.
Right.
They claim they're enriching uranium so they can make power. You only have to enrich it to 3% for that. They've enriched their uranium to 60%. To make a bomb, you need 90% enriched. So if you only need 3% for power, why are you enriching it to 60%?
Yep.
And they had enough for like 14 bombs, I think. So it's like, okay, very clear what you're doing here. You are pointing the gun at Israel. The other thing is that on October 7th, when Hamas invaded Israel and killed over 1,000 people, that was Iran. Iran runs Hamas, or used to. Iran used to run a group in Lebanon called Hezbollah, and they attacked as well. And they basically not quite ran Syria, but they had their fingers involved in Syria before the regime got overthrown. And they run the Houthis, which have closed the Red Sea. So they've been attacking Israel for a year and a half and longer.
Yeah.
And Israel's finally attacking back.
It's their proxy armies, you could say.
Yeah.
What's interesting is the fears that were initially voiced in the build-up to this potentially, and then immediately following the strike, is the fear that this would ignite like World War III, or
Tucker
that
Carlson thinks so.
Yeah, it will drag the U.S. into the Middle East again with our military. I'm not agreeing with that perspective. It looks like Iran is having it handed to them, and I think what Khamenei is probably worried about now.
Who is Khamenei?
He's the supreme leader.
Oh, okay. He's the supreme religious leader of
who is the ultimate leader of the king, as it were, of
even though officially they have a secular leader.
They do, but they're on a tier below him.
Right. Yeah.
So I think that there's worry that there could be a domestic uprising, because there's been rumblings in the past. I think the most recent closest one was, I think, during Obama's presidency.
Yep.
Much of their leadership has been eliminated, damaged severely, and are continuing to be. Probably the more immediate fear for Khomeini is that he might get overthrown.
Yeah, for sure.
And domestically. So, and it wouldn't surprise me if there are elements from Israel actively working to push somebody forward as a new leader within Iran just for that purpose. Who knows? But I don't see how Iran can fight this thing out long term. They've got bloodied so bad right off the bat. Their air force is basically toast.
Right. Mm-hmm. What I've heard is that Israel has achieved air dominance over western Iran, which is the parts closest to Israel, and the capital city of Tehran. What that means, effectively, is Iran is incapable of putting a plane in the air over their own capital city without having it shot down.
That's pretty telling.
That's pretty telling.
Yeah. Right. And you got the traditional allies of Iran would be like Russia and China. Russia, obviously, involved in its own war. I don't know how eager they're going to be to try to send resources down.
In fact, I think it's been going the other way. I think Iran has been sending resources to Russia.
Yeah, drones and stuff. China, we all know, has had its eye on Taiwan. Mm-hmm. And I don't know how eager they're going to be in engaging, coming to Iran's rescue. So
it really so Israel's saying this could be weeks. We're going to keep going until we've achieved our war goals, basically. It's not going to just be... It'll still be going on Thursday unless Iran has fallen.
There has been the reach out to by the regime to say, okay, we want to negotiate, like you were alluding to earlier. Maybe that will be entertained. I don't know.
Yeah. So that is the interesting thing. So Trump tweeted out or Truth Socialed out on Thursday night, maybe, or Friday morning. I can't remember. I gave Iran 60 days to make a deal. This is day 61.
Go
You should have
for
made
it.
a deal.
Yeah.
Now maybe you have a second chance, he said. And then now today, Iran has reached out urgently to all of their friendly nations saying, hey, we want to talk to the U.S. if, one, they don't get involved, and two, the Israelis stop destroying us.
Yeah.
And that's been just the past few hours as we're recording that's been happening. So maybe something will come of that. I'll be surprised if Israel's willing to call it off on a dime like that. But, maybe.
I would think if Israel has its biggest objective was get rid of the nuclear capabilities for Iran. If they have achieved that, maybe they've achieved that already. I don't know. But if they have, I could see them being willing at that point to say, okay, let's negotiate.
So is this World War III? A lot of people are screaming about, I'm not going to die for Israel.
Yeah.
I don't think it's World War III. I think there's a lot of preemptive stuff happening right now that's to avoid World War III.
I think there's just a lot of anti-Semites out there.
There seem to be. Holy cow.
There do seem to be.
Particularly on the internet, for whatever that's worth.
And lots of them are people who I agree with on lots of other things. And then they say something about the Jews, and I'm like, oh.
What?
Yeah.
So we will see what happens, but I don't necessarily see a big draft happening.
No, yeah.
I hope I'm wrong.
It is interesting
I'm not wrong.
looking at the timeline of how this has happened, because that's the date. That's the fear, is that America will have to do a draft to support Israel in Iran. That's the fear from people like Tucker Carlson, is that thousands of Americans would die.
Tucker, don't worry. You're not going to be drafted.
And neither will anyone you know.
Well, it's probably his sons is what he would say.
Yeah. But they're not going to be drafted either. So maybe that was somewhat of a valid fear 2 years ago in early 2023. Or June 2023. But then October 7th happened, and Israel went to war with Hamas, and Israel has basically destroyed Hamas. And then the operation, I got to pull up what Doug
Rising
said today.
Rising
No,
Lion.
that's this.
Yeah.
That's what's going on right now.
Right.
I'm talking about one of our writers for the Patriot Post, Douglas Andrews, wrote, if the mullahs didn't learn a thing or two from Operation Grim Beeper, well, we can't help them.
Yeah,
which was
the golden beeper.
Hezbollah, the attack on the Hezbollah.
So Israel orchestrated an incredible attack on Hezbollah, another Iranian
It's
proxy
like
group.
something out of a movie.
Right, where a beeper message came through because they were using beepers instead of cell phones.
Isn't that
and then
because the
the
Jews
beepers
in
blew up.
Hollywood anyway? That's
Right.
they have all that creativity.
Yes.
Right.
Yes, the beepers were bombs.
Right.
They created a shell company that sold real beepers and also bomb beepers, and they only sold the bomb beepers to Hezbollah.
Right. It was awesome. And I'm unapologetic for that. Death to terrorists. I'm not afraid to say it. So Israel has beaten Hamas, basically. There's still some of them, but they're not a factor. They've beaten Hezbollah. The Syrian regime fell. And just this year, the U.S. spent a month bombing the crap out of the Houthis. Those are the four main groups that were supposed to back Iran up if Israel went to war with Iran. They're in no position to give any backup, and now Israel is beating the crap out of Iran too. It's like, okay, maybe 2 years ago you could worry that this would lead to World War III, but look at the playing field now.
Yeah.
We'll see what happens, but this looks like this could be a pretty quick war.
Yeah. And of course, Israel's not having it all their own way. There have been some missiles that have impacted in Israel, which is terrible and tragic. But
the Iron Dome is a marvel.
It is a marvel. And I think 22 missiles have impacted out of like 270.
Yeah.
So that means 248 have been shot down.
That's awesome.
That's pretty cool. I think that's pretty interesting. Honestly, I'm really cheering Israel on here. I know lots of people on the right are very, very angry about that, but too bad.
Yeah, and I mean, what would be awesome is actually that the regime of Khomeini is overturned. At the very least, some type of muted Islamic or even just secularistic government takes over and opens that country up back to what it was pre the 1979 revolution.
Right. Mm-hmm. That's the thing for young people. For me, it took until I was 22 years old before I knew, Iran used to be like a cultural hotbed.
Yeah.
It used to be a place you'd want to go visit.
Yeah.
It's only basically in my lifetime and a little bit before that it's been just the pits.
Yeah, Lebanon used to be that way too.
Yeah.
And thanks to Hezbollah.
So maybe Israel can knock the teeth out of all the terrorists and the Middle East can become really cool. Wouldn't that be nice?
Yeah. Iran wants to see America and Israel destroyed.
It does.
And Israel and America want to see Iran full of billboards and beautiful restaurants and a wonderful standard of living.
Yeah. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
Pretty much.
True.
Yeah. All right. I think that's a pretty good summary of this situation, Andrew. We've talked about pride. We've talked about protests. And now we've talked about Persia. And that's our episode for today. We are the Pop Culture Contrarians. We're brought to you by the Patriot Post, which is the oldest conservative news digest on the web. It's right and it's free. Be sure to like and subscribe, and we'll see you next week. Bye.
Bye.
See you guys.